What's going on, everybody? Nick Alley here. Thanks for tuning in for your music update for this week. For this week, I wanted to talk about a huge milestone for an album that is just absolutely massive and a game changer for the 21st century music scene, which is the great, the one, the only 21 by Adele. This album was absolutely massive just when it was just released from the get-go, and it really just helped Adele catapult herself into the stratosphere as a global act. This album is credited as an absolute quintessential breakup album and one of the greatest albums of all time, as well as the biggest selling album and just gigantic impact that it had in the music industry of the 21st century so far. What's so cool about it is that this is her sophomore album following her album 19, which catapulted in the stratosphere after being featured on SNL with Sarah Palin. As a sophomore album, a lot of times artists are feared with the sophomore slump. They also get the Best New Artist award at the Grammys, and there's just, that curse where we aren't really expecting much from them, or, they just flop and don't live up to expectations. Adele's 21 was a complete outlier for that, so it was an absolute great feat to see. And today I just wanted to talk about what the impact was, the history behind it, and all that. Adele's 21 was first released January 24th in 2011 in the UK, but didn't make its US appearance until February 22nd, 2011. The album was originally supposed to be an upbeat type of album. Adele was kind of named as this kind of major tragedy act where she had written about, great heartbreak before and just kind of sad songs in general. So this was kind of her time where she wanted to create something more upbeat, show that she was more diverse and whatnot. Obviously, that didn't pan out as well. So some of the composers and productionists on this record include Rick Rubin, we have Ryan Tedder, Dan Wilson, just all, helping out Adele and helping produce this huge magnum opus of hers. Absolutely insane to see, the legacy past all this where things have just, risen and made such a huge cultural impact. First thing that really led to this was Adele's rollout for her lead single, Rolling in the Deep. If you're anyone anywhere within the last 10 years, I'm sure you've heard Rolling in the Deep at some point in your life. What was so huge about Rolling in the Deep was that it was a huge crossover hit. So, you have your demographic where it's usually tailored to the older demographic. However, it was just a massive song where it blew up and went to, cross-generational, cross-genres of all kind being played on Top 40, AC, radio. This led to it being a 7-week leader on the Hot 100 as her as a female British star. Very uncommon, but, as we do give love to the Brits over here, but it was just a massive moment in this time frame when before she had a few hits from her SNL appearance and just general idea of what she was, just not the Adele yet. At the time, Adele was able to create, Rolling in the Deep, and it ended up being a huge, massive song. Within that first year, it ended up selling 8.7 million digital song sales, which is unprecedented. At the time, this was the most sold digital song by a female. Now, looking back into it in January 2020, this song has sold 20.6 million units digitally, which has made it become the largest digital selling song of all time. So absolutely huge feat by Adele, and just to give you kind of an idea, that's what we're looking at for these numbers. These are numbers that we haven't seen in, throughout my whole decade following the industry and sales and records and numbers and charts and everything. These numbers have not really even coming close. So we're gonna follow this theme as we go. One funny thing that we should mention about this album as well, or at least this song, is that Adele is credited as a heel stiletto tapper in the credits, which I always thought was funny. So you can hear her in the production of the song where she's literally tapping, and I just thought it was fun. And I didn't know that until I was researching today. So there you go. We have Rolling in the Deep, massive song, right? Can't get any bigger. Wrong, we have Someone Like You, easily the most quintessential breakup song of all time, following on the most quintessential breakup album of all time. It's so absolutely crazy with this album, just seeing all this kind of unfold. And what was absolutely so cool was that we saw this first display of the song. I mean, she had performed it a lot, but it wasn't until its grand appearance at the Brit Awards in 2011, followed by her performance at the VMAs in 2011 as well, performing Someone Like You live with just her and a standalone piano, really showing just true emotion. And it was absolutely just heartbreaking. I remember watching the VMAs with my parents and just people crying. It was just so intense. And if you look at some of the things that Adele said about the song, she wrote the song very, after she wrote Rolling in the Deep, Rumor Has It, all these songs that, lead to not so much anger, but she just had so much frustration about her relationship, which this album is based off of. And this was one of the last songs written for the album. And she, says that this is like quoting herself. She really freed up, opened herself up a little bit while listening to this and creating the song. And then eventually she believes that this song will be her magnum opus, kind of balancing herself between Rolling in the Deep and Someone Like You. She thinks that if this was a song that there was going to be, defining her career, it was going to be Someone Like You. Again, this song, massive hit. Not as huge selling wise as Rolling in the Deep, but it's at 17.6 million as of this recording, which I think is still pretty good. The song has been covered by numerous artists. It's been spoofed on SNL. It's, the only song, or I should say at the time, it was the only song that was performed only with a piano and a vocalist on the Hot 100 to reach #1. I think that at the end of the day, one of the greatest things about the song was that this, by the UK, was named the number 3 favorite #1 in the last 60 years, only behind Billie Jean by Michael Jackson and Bohemian Rhapsody by Queen. So just to put that in kind of perspective, that she's beaten so many other huge #1s throughout the year and is in fierce competition with easily some of the greatest rock and pop acts of all time. The album ended up featuring a few more hits too. Obviously you have Set Fire to the Rain, which was another huge US hit, as well as an international hit, Rumor Has It, which reached top 20 for a few other things, Turning Tables released in a few other countries, but just absolutely massive album. But the singles only do it so much justice. The album itself is absolutely crazy. What's so amazing about the 21 album as a whole is that it really is cohesive in the sense of its track list. And anyone could say that about an album, but like the whole point of this is that you're going through the stages of a relationship, right? You're going through anger, you're going through grief, you're going through madness, you're going through blah, 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 acceptance. This was, again, you're starting with Rolling in the Deep, the #1 hit single from the lead of the album, and then ending with Someone Like You, arguably one of the biggest breakup songs of all time. Just overall, it was such a huge impact in the way that people developed and listened to the album. This wasn't when we had the Spotify or when we had Apple Music or anything like that for streaming, really. There was, bits and pieces of it, but it wasn't catapulted into the stratosphere that it is today. I don't know if we would have had the amount of impact, or I don't think that even today we're seeing, huge artists are releasing even big albums now, and they're not having the selling and whatnot impact that 21 had. First week that it was released, it sold 350,000 records. It ended up being #1 for 24 non-consecutive weeks. It was a #1 album. It was the #1 album, not even just through 2011, but through 2012. An album released a year ago beat every other record released in 2012, and it was the most selling record of the whole year. So she's only one of 4 acts that has ever done that. She went diamond on this in the fastest amount of time since NSYNC released their No Strings Attached album. I don't know if Gen Z or the upcoming music fans have listened to this album, but like if you want to know and like just see how much of the balladry and the roots influence and folk that was utilized in this album, it really just, it changed the landscape, but it almost didn't. It was weird because in that time frame we were having huge songs with like EDM drops. The EDM phase was really big back then. You had hits by David Guetta, Calvin Harris, Rihanna had We Found Love, so many different things, where this was like an anomaly. The whole thing was an anomaly, and like the best part about this is that this album is almost credited to saving the industry's record sales for 2 consecutive years. Like, it just has sold so much. It sold like 31 million copies so far, and it's it's outrageous to me. So I'm just looking back on it, I think that it's very beautifully written. I think Adele has great vocal things on it, and I think we have to remember, like, it's a cross-generational and cross-genre album. Like, it just blew up everywhere, and everyone that I know can, definitely sing almost every bit of Someone Like You, knows Rolling in the Deep, knows all these things. I just think that 21 just blew up, and it was something that we never were expecting in the music industry. It's not something that we would never expect nowadays, and I just think it was really cool. So I wanted to talk about it, just give it some love on its anniversary. It's 10 years now, and I really would like to do this with other albums, but for 21, did it impact me as much? Not too much, but it was right when I was getting into the music scene, and like, I didn't really know how much of an anomaly this was. I knew that, digital sales were kind of the thing at my age. Like, it was just crazy when we were even having like 300,000 albums or singles sold digitally. This was the first album ever to sell 1 million digital copies of it sells. Like, the whole thing is just wild. So I just think that, again, just wanted to shed some light on it. Hopefully you guys know about this album a little bit more now too. Give it a listen. Give Adele her respect. She deserves it. She's a queen. She's an icon.